Melissa Fleming, welcome to Anti-Racism Live.
Great to be with you, Jeremy.
The first question I'd like to ask you, Melissa, is could you tell us about your work and mission as the Undersecretary General for Global Communications at the United Nations, and why the 21st of March, the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, is so important to you?
Okay, well, thanks, Jeremy. Well, leading communications means that I not only communicate and lead teams who communicate about the work of the United Nations around the world, but it's also to, promote the values of the United Nations. And those values are a world in which every single person can thrive in peace, dignity, and equality on a healthy planet. And in this vision, there is no racism, there's no intolerance, and there is no discrimination of any kind.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I suppose by therefore raising awareness of the 21st of March, you're thereby providing an opportunity for people to participate in the vision of the UN.
No, absolutely. Unfortunately, the scourge of racism continues, even though it's been 75 years since that wonderful document that we just celebrated its anniversary of, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, says very clearly and impresses upon member states to implement in their legislation and policies that everyone is entitled to the rights and freedoms without discrimination for race or color. But nevertheless, unfortunately, we can continue to see racism in multiple forms, fundamentally, putting one race as superior over others. And unfortunately, also, of course, with the internet, which has, given people access to information all over the world and has, increased the potential on social media for people who have been traditionally vulnerable and voiceless. At the same time, it has also unleashed all kinds of horrific hate speech towards groups, racism that is able to spread without guardrails, and this has exacerbated underlying racism and made it worse in many cases, including leading to offline violence against people of other groups.
Thank you, Melissa. Can I ask you, where do you feel the global community is on its journey to eradicating racism?
I do believe, there are moments in time, like the International Day for the Elimination of Discrimination, the so-called Anti-Racism Day, to kind of reaffirm and re-educate, because it really does come down it comes down to policies, including laws that governments have on the books. It comes down to, the guardrails that social media companies put in place, social media companies that have so much power over the discourse in our world. If hate speech is allowed to run rampant, you're obviously going to fuel and ignite flames, fuel fires that can make things worse. So it's an opportunity to remind of the accountability and the responsibility. Those who have power over our online discourse, they can make a difference. So we need to join forces on these days and take stock of where we are on fighting racism. And if we haven't reached the levels of tolerance that we want, we need to recommit and do more again.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Melissa. I follow you on social media, and it's always incredible to see the information that you put out into the world, which is in many ways inspiring and informative and engaging. And so thank you for doing that. And obviously, the world is in a very, very difficult situation in a number of key places across the entire world, which is seeing an increase in racism, hatred, dividing communities as a consequence of these crises. What's your assessment of the situation, and can we turn it around?
Well, we always have to aspire to turn it around. And there are, incredible blueprints that we can refer to. For example, the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. This is the UN's blueprint to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance around the world. I mean, our raison d'etre at the UN is also to fight inequality. It's part of the SDGs. Our country teams around the world are working with governments to reduce inequalities. And inequalities are very often linked to racism. And so we are, approaching this work with the understanding that it is partially and very often due to discrimination in our societies that we do have, racism that continues. Unfortunately, we also have, something like 200 conflicts around the world. And, conflicts are also often linked to, hatred of another group, hatred of an ethnic minority, or they fuel, existing hatreds, or hatreds are used to justify, waging the war in the first place. So we have another challenge in that sphere, to really not just aim for peace. And I know you work night and day on peace, but equally the intolerance and the fear of the other that has a ripple effect all over the world. If you look at the conflict right now in Israel and Gaza, we're seeing, a spike in anti-Semitism globally. We're seeing a spike in anti-Muslim bigotry. People have been killed as a result. We need to really, really work on this and not to allow these wars to turn societies everywhere into polarized, dangerous places, pitting ourselves against the other. So we're working as we can at the UN on this, reminding over and over of each person's dignity, each person's equality. Every man, woman, and child on this earth has the right to live in peace and dignity, and equality. And that is really our mantra.
Yeah. I mean, you are working on these issues every day. As I said, I follow you on social media, obviously, and follow the work and always have done of the United Nations. I happen to think it's the closest organization that we have to holding the global community together. And I certainly will do anything I can to support. Can I ask you, when you see what you see every day, Melissa, all over the world in relation to the 200 conflicts that you spoke of, where do you draw your hope from, Melissa? What makes you think that we can turn this around? Where's the hope come from?
And for me, the hope comes from mostly individual stories of just reaching out to people, helping other people, reaching across the lines, having discussions on college campuses, fueling kind of debate and discussion. So, I've had working for refugees for 10 years. I had so many instances. It was really often, you could despair at the numbers of people who had been forced to flee their homes, but get energized at the same time by the welcome and the humanity that we were able to witness by, coming to refugees who had nothing but the clothes on their back, members, of the local community who welcomed them, even though they had no linkage with them at all. And the humanity of also some governments that, upheld refugee protection under international law, but even went beyond that and provided everything needed for those refugees, not just to survive, but also to thrive. So we're seeing this, ongoing, and we're seeing, a lot of attempts in other dimensions when we talk about racism. African Americans in the country that I'm from, the United States, we've seen a lot of progress in the advancement of African Americans, their rights, their rising to the top in education and professions. There's a long way to go, but we have to latch on to also those stories so that we don't lose hope.
Thank you, Melissa. And for those who don't know, actually, Melissa's written an incredible book called A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea. So if you do want to be inspired, I suggest you have a read of that. I hope you don't mind me plugging your book, Melissa, but it is a story of hope right there.
It's a story of hope because it is a story that if you read it, you understand why people risk their lives to, flee their homes and to seek a different life in other countries. And once and I think that comes back to the theme of what we're talking about. It is, people are different. People are culturally different. They come from all kinds of different backgrounds. But the more we know about them, and the more we're educated about other people and their circumstances, their cultures, their religions, their backgrounds, their histories, their persecution, then we're much better able to open our hearts and become more accepting and caring and loving towards them.
Yeah, completely agree, Melissa. Thank you. Finally, to the person feeling perhaps disempowered by what they're seeing in the news or their personal predicament, what would you say to kind of inform, inspire and engage them really in the journey to eliminating racial discrimination? And are there any resources or destinations you'd like them to go to feel that empowered to be part of the change?
Well, I would just like to again emphasize how important education and awareness is. And I really hope that it's starting in our schools, because no child is born racist. No child is born discriminating against somebody else. Children are born with love in their hearts, and we would like people to stay that way. But those, we also have all kinds of tools at the United Nations for people who want to get involved. We urge everybody who's interested to follow our social media channels at UN or at United Nations, depending on where you are on social media, where we're often putting out inspirational stories of people coming together in all kinds of dimensions, as well as our campaigns. We have a very specific campaign called #FightRacism, and we have another campaign, #NoToHate. And you can find also those materials on the UN website if you want to get involved in sharing the content from those campaigns, the very important messaging, and being a part of those who say, I fight racism myself, and I say no to hate. And I will not be part of spreading it, and I will call it out when I see it.
Melissa Fleming, we wish you the very best doing the incredible work that you do. Thank you for participating today, and the very best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.